Well, good afternoon, Keona Bowens. Welcome to your MelanatED Minute where?
We talk the things them.
Yes. All right. So, kind of like another iteration of Melanated, like we wanted to have some conversations with some of our, customers and supporters about, our recent unbox line. Because one of the things that we noticed that was different with this one than our other shirts was that there's a lot of discussion about people like as they were sharing. It's like, oh, I remember this time that such and such happened, and like people just resonating with the ideas of kind of going against what the traditional standard of being is for Black people, people of color in general. And so that's how we kind of started this whole you know series that we're doing right now. And I had reached out to you because remember we posted our I forget which one it was, but you had kind of chimed in, was like, oh, I got stories. And so we want to lean into that a little bit. And so wanted to really just turn over to you to ask, one, what was the shirt that got you, and then like what is your experience with it?
So I'm in the mental health field. I'm a therapist, and I've worked in this field my whole career. So since 2003, maybe. And now you're seeing a surgence of melanated therapy, helping culturally, culturally identifying and helping people within our cultural framework. Whereas before, you had to, look a certain way, move and behave a certain way, and it wasn't really allowing us to connect with clients that look like us. I'll say that. And I just love this movement now. Look, I can be a therapist and wear henna. I can wear my hoops and my jewelry. And my clients, the kids I work with, the adults I work with, we get each other. And it's more accessible, more reachable, and able to connect and understand and be understood. Being able to be my full self and not having to wear a mask at work. And this is me speaking from having a private practice and me speaking from being in corporate environments, nonprofit environments, hospital systems. You get to just show up and be who you are. And I love it. I love it now. It's a newfound energy and a newfound appreciation for the work that I do.
Right. First of all, Hannah's popping. That's real.
Ain't it?
But I wanted to say one of the things that come up is like somehow like now we have permission to enter into our work as our whole self. And this whole idea about, well, back in the day I couldn't do this, or at one point in time like I couldn't come with Hannah home, and just kind of wonder like where does that come from? It's like what was it in you, or when did it click in you that it was okay to go against the grain? Like you mentioned the whole melanated therapy movement, but was that it? Was it something else?
It helped that now it's culturally acceptable. Black is king right now. But I can remember respectability politics and having to, especially early in my career, I said when I was in my early 20s and stuff like that. My parents, only went so far with their education, and therefore their jobs were limited based on their education. And so when me being the first in my family to go to college, it's like I had an expectation of fitting in and being in a space where they did not have access to. And so I had to look and move differently and not like my full self, because I needed to be in that space for their benefit, or to, for them to feel like it wasn't in vain or proud of me or whatever. And I remember when I worked for CPS, actually one of my first jobs, and I had an office and a business card. And my dad to this day probably still has that business card, because he felt like he was so proud, like I've arrived, and I was miserable. I hated that. Well, I didn't hate the job. It was a difficult job. Yeah. Being who I am, part Tupac, part part revolutionary, being in that role and not being able to really help people that look like me in the way that I wanted to, because you've got to, you know, fit, not only just fit in, but you're very limited on what you can say and how you can say things. And so I did that, one, knowing that it meant something to my dad for me to be there. And I go to the office with my young, I was maybe 23, 24, something around there. And I would go and just see all types of injustice to children and families, and because a lot of times it was because of cultural things that we just do, as Black people, that the mainstream doesn't. And I remember having to explain to somebody that it was a young mom. She was feeding her baby. So obviously the kids are in foster care. They only have like an hour a week to visit with their children. And the mom came in, she was feeding her baby maybe Kool-Aid in a bottle, something that we do. You know what I mean? Yeah, it happens. Is it healthy? No. Is it nutritious? No. But we do that. Right. And my colleague, who is young Caucasian girl, was writing this up like it was abusive, and it was a strike against this mom who was doing only things she knew. So me having to be the cultural translator and save this mom from having a strike against her from, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So stuff like that, showing up like that. Then I don't think it's as much of an issue or problem now, because everybody is seeking cultural competence, and it's okay, and it's allowed. And even the cultural trainings that we had back then weren't nearly as in-depth or as inclusive as African American culture. We got to learn about, or we had to consider, Asian cultures and how they do move differently within their communities. Even some, African cultures, because there's a lot of, just the foreign exchange and immigrant communities. But African American culture is not mainstream culture either. And so now that we can consider everybody has like a common understanding of what grown up Black is, what grown up Black in America is. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see and experience right now. I'm glad my daughter is living in this time in a lot of ways, because, it's like she won't have the same type of assimilation and, self-esteem issues that we had kind of growing up, not being able to just be Black in here. Being in the field that I am, I have colleagues and peers and friends. Most of my colleagues, friends, and peers are all mental health therapists. So I don't hold on to anything. I have several group chats that whenever I'm feeling some kind of way, or we're feeling some kind of way, we immediately, seek support from each other. So I can't really think of something I've been holding on to. I need to just unleash, because I learned to not hold on to that.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Can you talk about the value of that for you? Like, how has that been valuable for you? Yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. Like, Daphne is a good girlfriend of mine, but I don't ever always want to bring doom and gloom to Daphne, or to, friends who are not in this industry. So we get each other. We get when, we sometimes have like a dark kind of sense of humor about things too. So it's not to be, seeming as inappropriate or making light of or something. We need, and we build each other up, we affirm each other, we laugh, we cry, we give space to each other, that we can't do anywhere else. And it helps that majority of us, for the majority of my circle, are Black women. So that's like another level of just understanding, having been, professionals, running our businesses as professional Black women, being disrespected in certain spaces, or disregarded until we pop out and do and pop out and do, big things, then, it's different. But the behind the scenes and having that support is goodness, I can't even describe it, how more than helpful and necessary.
Yeah, it's almost like its own type of therapy, right? I think about that. Like behind every strong woman is a group chat hyping her up.
Right.
And I think often about how, like, I'm in a meeting with my colleagues, somebody will say something, and it's like, the internal, like, and then you go to the side chat, right? And so, like,
right.
On your phone, or it's like in the little chat box you have up, because it's like sometimes, like you said, like you want to be able to say and express things, but you can't because you're at work, or because it's, you're not going to get it because you're not me. Like, you don't have this experience. So being able to have, that other layer of people, like community, really is what it is the piece that is, super helpful and super needed. And I think even in, your your care and being guard, like all of us being gardeners, like, I have experiences, but I can't share with them because I work there. Like, that's a part of, the rules in terms of, professionalism. Don't talk bad about your employer, which, okay, we get that, sure. But it's like, anybody above reproach, anybody above critique. But
right.
That we have to be careful because, we can't move like everybody else move in this world. And so it's that guardedness. And I think that's why for so long, for so many of us anyway, that, this permission to be something else is just like a new thing because, as we have the world go, people become more comfortable, more free. Like whether it was, having Michelle Obama in the White House looking like us, or whether it's this new movement that came since George Floyd, where people are finally acting like, oh yeah, so these things really are. But I wanted to say, particularly for you, Keona, since I know that you work in a hospital setting and there's like talk right now going on with COVID and that one Black female doctor who died and felt she wasn't getting the care that she needed, like, ignored. And when the hospital responded, what he said is that, oh, well, I'm not going to say that, essentially saying that, our treatment was fine, but the nurses were probably intimidated about her because she was knowledgeable about her care. And, she was critiquing them on Facebook. And so it's like, and I remember reading that, thinking to myself, I'm like, this man, thought that it was okay to say that, I'm going to give a pass to my staff for not providing some level of care that she needs because she was intimidating. And she was intimidating. Why? Because she's a doctor and she knows what kind of care she needs. And for me, the fact that he was willing to say that in print for the whole world to read tells me how ingrained it is, like in the system, whether it's healthcare or just in, white people in general, that this is a valid reason for someone to be treated in this manner. This lady is literally dying. She's telling her doctors and her nurse that she's in pain. She needs this kind of medicine. And they're looking at her, like she said, like she's a crackhead just trying to get another hit. And, and him saying what we all knew is like people are, afraid of us just for us being who we are, looking the way we look, and then knowing it's like, how dare she demand, treatment. And that. And so, like you're saying, like in your work, when you see these injustices or things going on, like my thing is always like, how do you think? I feel like I'd be popping off like all the time.
Daff, you first off.
She got the group chat
all the time. No.
And it's just like ridiculous. It's like we're not safe.
It is. And it's very, very frustrating. Like I cannot emphasize how frustrating it is. Without, telling someone's story, protecting privacy and medical information. There is a specific case that it's just absolutely medical neglect, in my professional opinion. When I brought it to the attention of my director in writing, verbally, to several levels of, command. And I didn't see any follow through or follow up. And it was brushed off as, well, that psychiatrist, everyone knows that's what he does. That's just how he is. And I never got any feedback on what was the outcome for that patient either. But I know I would go to, work 12-hour shifts. I go in every 2-3 days. So week after week, I'm seeing the same patient in the same position. And then finally, like a month later, this patient is back in the same position, same place, returned in the same condition. Yeah. And it's so frustrating because what can I really do? I've done what, advocated as much as I can, sent it up my chain of command, and what? And so when I saw the story of that doctor who passed away from COVID, I knew exactly that almost helpless feeling, and of like, what you're doing, all that you can, all that's in your power to do, and still expire.
Right.
And no one's accountable.
And no one's accountable.
Right.
And no one's accountable. And that's the thing too, like for me, but it's all disgusting. But the thing that hit me the most in that story was the idea that the nurses or the staff or whoever aren't giving her the proper care, and proper care, because she's being difficult and they're intimidated by her, and all of, like, the lady knows what she's talking about. The lady knows. If a medical doctor in the hospital cannot be assumed to know what she's talking about when she has done this very work, is there any hope for anybody else? And then how she gets labeled, right? This woman is deceased because y'all didn't do your jobs properly. And Here you come talking about some difficulties and the staff being intimidated. And it just brings to mind, I watched the Fresh Prince reunion the other day, and how Will Smith was talking to, God help me, I forgot her name, original Aunt Viv.
Janet Hibbert.
Janet Hibbert, thank you. And, he had no idea, or I interpreted that he had no idea of the impact that his words and the way he talked about her back then, how that impacted her life. Right. And her professional life and her ability to work and to support herself. And, there was no consideration of the situation that she was in. And, one of the points that she made was that when you get labeled as difficult, as a Black woman with dark skin, it's another level, and you get these labels attached to you. And for her, she lost her professional opportunities. She said she lost her house, like her, financial situation.
Yeah, it changed the trajectory of her life.
Completely. And the same thing with this lady. She gets labeled as difficult, this doctor gets labeled as difficult, and now she is just simply passed away. When it did, I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't really know if it could have been prevented, but at the very, I don't like the language around, and to me it brings up this idea of, so I'm a curriculum development specialist, right? So for me it's around critical pedagogy and the acknowledgement that everybody exists in a particular context. And in order to, like I said, I'm not a medical doctor, but I imagine that in order to treat a person, it might be important in some cases to consider their context. Right? So this lady, yes, she might be hooting and hollering, but that's because she knows what to do and she's asking you to do it and you're not doing it. And she's in pain, exactly. Yeah, and she knows that it can be fixed and you are not fixing it. And you are treating her like she is drug seeking. And she knows that because she sees
that.
Exactly. Like, and even around the story that you shared earlier about the mother who was feeding her child what she had to feed her. The context of that woman's life is that this is how I know to take care of a child.
Mm-hmm.
But the
The
assumption is that you're
irony
being
of that
neglectful.
story, Crystal, the irony of that story is that mom herself grew up in foster care. So my my thought around that then was, if the state raised her and she's doing it wrong, who taught her the wrong way?
There it is.
The same people
There it
that's
is.
blaming her for
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
the system.
The
I just
system.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as I can put it. And I think that, again, like we mentioned earlier today, these conversations are around sharing experiences and so on, so that at the very least, I want folks to walk away being able to have a fuller conversation about whatever it is they're talking about. So that we can only be more empathetic to each other and more compassionate towards each other if we are aware, or if we are open to the possibility that our experience is not the only way that this world can be experienced.
Yeah.
And I just wish that those nurses and those the doctors and the CEO guy from the hospital, I just wish that they had the tools, or were willing to use the tools that would help them to be more empathetic and compassionate. And then maybe this lady would still have her life. And that just aggravates me that she doesn't.
Because they missed an opportunity to use her as a resource. First off, COVID is new to everybody. No one knows what this is and what's happening. Here you are, you have a patient, an educated patient, a patient who treats this disease, who is giving you the blueprint, who's giving you, feeding you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to practice medicine. I'm telling you. Right. And pride and ego, I'm telling you, in the medical field is the first thing of downfall.
The whole platform about MelanatED is just that, kind of change the narrative about, not just Black and brown people in education that we have, but what Crystal said is to provide education for, these things people are unaware of, because that's where hatred and bigotry and all this stuff come from, because we don't know. People just out here making stuff up based off the little sound bites, that they see. And the results are catastrophic, as we can see. And so, we're trying to create this opportunity for people to have these dialogues, to have these conversations, to look at people differently. It's like, you know what? Everybody ain't out here telling the same lie. We ain't
for years.
Right, for centuries, even, you got to deal with it. You have to work through it. And that's where, the group chats become handy, because it's in this together. And so let's support each other in this. And this is why affinity spaces are so crucial. And that's why our brand is really targeting, the BIPOC community, because we different. Oh, we all bleed the same on the inside. Yeah, but on the outside,
some of us bleed it more frequently than others. So
correct. You seeing my blood, mother other people's blood, because why? Because we different. And so creating that space, and not being ashamed of, even Crystal and I, Crystal, you remember when we were initially talking about this, we was like, oh yeah, we want to do this for higher ed people, Black people, whatever. And then we had that thought. I was like, we want to be more inclusive and not just be for Black people, in general. We were like, okay, yeah, right. Because, make sure that everybody come and buy something, right? But then, afterwards, Chris was like, you know what? Nah.
We can't do it.
What we gonna stick with? We gonna do this for the Black and brown people, because this is our thing. But it's like, even in this brand that's for people of color, we had that thought, well, maybe open to everybody. Don't want to leave anybody out. But they stay leaving us out. They don't care. And that's like when you were talking earlier, Crystal, about this lack of knowing a different perspective. That's why I love travel. That's one of the things that really got me into it. It's like, I'm all for, doing it for the gram and whatnot. But for me, when I travel, I truly go because I know that having a different perspective is important. Seeing how other people live is important, right? And it really started in graduate school. 9/11 happened. I remember being an undergrad, and that was a mess. And how, people who identify as Muslim or who, looked the part. I remember going to graduate school, and one of my schoolmates, she identified as Muslim, and she was telling her story about how just jacked up her life has been since then, right? And the level of comfort where she say whether or not she is Muslim, or whether or not choose to wear a hijab or not. It's like all these things that change. And so just talking to her, because I'm coming in Christian, is like, only way but is Jesus, right? Coming off a church. And then she was like, yeah, no, there's other ways, because Muslim is not just my culture, it's my religion also. And so just learning about that, and then traveling and seeing how everybody does things, I'm like, oh. And it's so important. And that's why, having not even necessarily a friendship circle, but like people who, you can communicate with, like real people whose experiences are different than yours. I think that is so important. But people get so caught up in this fear. Oh, we can't go hang out with them because, they're that way. It's like, you don't know they're that way. Go talk to them. See what's up. And it helps so much. And it's not like, I'm exempt from being ignorant because, like I'm a world traveler. I have like, a diversity of friends, but that's one of the things that I feel like I appreciate from like growing up in California, because even our high school was like very diverse, and like we hung out a little bit of everybody, right? And then, kind of moving beyond and like going to graduate school, and then, learning different things like outside of the norm. It's helpful, and it even makes me, I think, more susceptible to even want to enter in these conversations. Because people are so rigid, like, no, Jesus is it. Jesus is all. I want to hear nothing else. You really don't want to just try and learn something new? It's like, no, and it's like, all right,
yeah. And then it doesn't take anything from you to let them have them
at all.
Even if you walk away still just staunchly Christian or wherever you came with, it does not take anything away from that to have space to just have someone be who they are.
Right. I remember one time I was something through like a Quran or something like that, and like one of my Christians was like, oh, "What are you doing with that?" I'm reading.
Like is it gonna burn you?
Like it's gonna do something. It's like, where'd you get that? It's like the bookstore. They sell these too, but it's just like it's Trey. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your experience. Did you have any parting words for the people that you want to share before we let you go?
No parting words. I wholly support what you guys are doing. I'm gonna get my t-shirt soon. I gotta figure out which one really mostly embodies me. Because when I saw leader, I was like, okay, that's cute. But then when I saw disrespectful, I said, that might be me. So I do. Crystal, I've heard your name, heard about you for years. So it's good to finally put a name to a face and
absolutely
not even meet you in real life, but you know what I mean. I feel like
it's as real as it's gonna get in COVID time.
Right. That's it.
Hold me when I'm falling. Niggas want it on me, want it till it on me. Stone up, now I'm stony. I got a lot of fake ones. I just want to bail out. Niggas monkey raw. I no time to mix so business emotions. So a lot of cautions.